In the world of One Piece, it's much different than the one that you and I know because most of it is nothing but water and small islands. And on that water is littered with pirates. Now, 22 years ago, the most famous pirate, a guy named Gold Roger, finally got captured and he was going to be brought to justice and killed. The problem is, Gold Roger had a fortune, a treasure like no other. So millions showed up to watch him not get executed, but to watch him reveal where his treasure was. And instead of revealing it, he just told the crowd, free yourself, take to the seas, and my treasure is yours to find. And that's exactly what they did. Gold Roger died shortly thereafter, but the group dispersed like ants when you knock over an anthill. They raced to their ships, got on the seas, and started looking for it. But 22 years later, no one's been able to find his treasure, which is called the One Piece. One of those that is currently looking for the One Piece is a teenager by the name of Monkey Luffy. And Luffy's not just like any boy. He was abandoned when he grew up, and all he wanted to do was be a pirate because he grew up near the docks and he would see pirates come in. He got really close with one pirate named Shanks, and he really wanted to join his crew, but Shanks wouldn't allow him because he was just too young. At one point, he snuck on Shanks' ship, and he found what's known as a devil fruit in one of the boxes. Specifically, what he found was a gum-gum fruit, and he didn't know any better, so he ate it. And it turned his entire body elastic. I mean, Luffy is basically Stretch Armstrong, but in real life. Luffy has dreams of finding the One Piece and becoming the king of the pirates. There's only one issue. He doesn't have a boat, he doesn't have a crew, and he can't swim. And when the boat that he does have ends up sinking, he has to hop into a barrel just to stay afloat. That barrel ends up knocking into an actual pirate ship, a pirate named Alvida. The barrel is loaded onto the ship. They have no idea that there's a person inside, but late that night, a boy by the name of Kobe ends up discovering the fact that someone was in the barrel. At first, he's pretty startled. He thinks that Luffy's going to kill him, but Luffy says, I'm not going to kill you. Kobe is pretty relieved to hear that, but he doesn't like it when Luffy says, I'm actually a pirate, because Kobe looks at pirates as scum. Can't blame him. Kobe hasn't had a good relationship with pirates. Alvida treats her crew like crap, and Kobe is on the bottom of the pecking order. So he can't figure out why a nice guy like Luffy would even want to be a pirate. And the thing that's appealing to Luffy is the freedom. And that's foreign to Kobe because on Alvida's crew, there is no freedom. He can't do anything without her say. Luffy shakes his head and says, you shouldn't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. I mean, if I did that, I would have never left my village to go find the One Piece. Kobe thinks he's absolutely nuts for even attempting to go get the One Piece. But as Luffy puts it, if someone's going to find it, why not be me? He tells Kobe that as soon as he's off this ship, he's going to go to the Grand Line, which is supposed to be the correct path in order to find the One Piece. But the Grand Line is more commonly referred to as the Pirate Graveyard because it's very dangerous. Now it's just a matter of getting off this ship, which Kobe is more than happy to help Luffy do. But as they're trying to get off, Monkey ends up hitting his oar against a metal beam and waking the entire crew up. At first, Alvida thinks that she's been betrayed by Kobe and he ratted her out to a bounty hunter. But she actually laughs when she finds out the truth about Luffy, that he's a, quote, pirate and he's out for the One Piece. Eventually, a fight breaks out when Alvida insults Kobe. Luffy sticks up for him, and that's when Luffy really shows off his elasticity. He beats the crap out of Alvida's crew, and he knocks her into the ocean with a devastating punch. Amazingly, though, he doesn't steal her boat. He just steals a lifeboat, and him and Kobe take off. Luffy informs Kobe as to how he's able to stretch the way he does, but then the conversation gets to the Grand Line and how exactly Luffy's going to get there, because he doesn't have a map. At this point, Kobe thinks that he made a mistake by leaving Alvida, so Luffy tries to remind him of why he didn't make a mistake, by asking him, if you could do anything in the world right now, what would it be? And Kobe tells him he wants to join the Marines, to help those who can't fight for themselves. Unlike Alvida, Luffy is very supportive, and he tells him, well then let's make that dream come true. He tells Kobe to plot a course to the closest Marine base, and they'll both get what they want. Luffy will get his map to the Grand Line, and Kobe can enlist. But Kobe knows that getting a map to the Grand Line isn't going to be that easy. Luffy, though, isn't really worried about it. The closest Marine branch is at a place called Shellstown. And when Luffy and Kobe arrive, the first thing they notice is all the wanted posters for pirates. In fact, one of them is actually for Alvida. But Luffy knows that they need to plan a way to get inside the military base so that he can get that map to the Grand Line. They head to the closest tavern, and as they both are trying to figure out a way to get inside, most of the ideas are terrible, and Kobe thinks that Luffy's crazy, a fight breaks out in the bar. It's between a legendary pirate bounty hunter by the name of Roronoa Zoro and a spoiled brat by the name of Helmeppo. Helmeppo's a spoiled brat because his father is Captain Morgan, the leader of the Marine base. He goes by the nickname Axe Hand because his hand is, folks, it's an axe. It's a very creative nickname. Well, Helmeppo learns a tough lesson in F around and find out. He had no idea who Roronoa was when he started messing with him. He had no idea how deadly Roronoa was. He certainly didn't know that Roronoa came from Sixus Island. It was there that he was approached by a guy named Mr. Seven who represented an organization known as Baroque Works. And they wanted to bring Roronoa into their group, but he turned him down. And when Number 7 threatened him, well, that was the end of Number 7's life. But Roronoa only kills pirates and people that have bounties on them. Turned out Mr. 7 was one of those guys. So Roronoa spares Helmeppo's life, and when he finds out that Helmeppo's father is Captain Morgan, he says, well, tell him he owes me money, because he wants to collect for his bounty. Captain Morgan is very impressed with what Roronoa was able to do. I mean, take out most of the Marines in the tavern and also scare the crap out of a spoiled brat of a kid. But he does let him know your penalty for assaulting a Marine is 7 days strung up in the yard. He tries to offer him a way out of this by saying if you join the Marines and work with us, you won't have to do that, but Roronoa is doing his own thing, and he has no interest in joining the Marines. So he's strung up in the yard for 7 days. And the next morning when Luffy is able to sneak into the base, the part where he sneaks into is the part where Roronoa is strung up. He's really impressed by Roronoa, especially with the fact that the fight started because Roronoa was sticking up for a little girl. And even though Luffy introduced himself as a pirate and Zoro introduced himself as a pirate hunter, Luffy still wants to help the guy out because he looks at him as a good guy. Now, he does ask him if he wants to join his team, which doesn't exist at the moment, and Roronoa laughs at it because, as he reminds Luffy, he kills pirates for a living. And even after that, Luffy unties him. With Roronoa free, Luffy continues on into the base to try to find a map, but he is the only one that's inside the base that doesn't belong inside the base. There's a thief by the name of Nami. Nami was able to get into the base because she was also in the tavern when the fight broke out, and when it did, she knocked out one of the Marines and stole his uniform. And just like Luffy, she's looking for a map to the Grand Line. Unfortunately for her, she ends up getting caught by the same Marine whose uniform she stole, and she has to knock him and another Marine out. As she's trying to make her way further into the base, Luffy shows up, and he overheard the conversation. He also knows she's not supposed to be there. They both realize pretty quickly they're sharing a common interest, a map to the Grand Line, and the Grand Line map is located in Morgan's office. Now it's just a matter of finding it. But they find Captain Morgan before they find his office. He asks what the hell they're doing because he doesn't recognize Nami. But she, thinking quick on her feet, just makes up a lie about how she's new and she's escorting this prisoner. And Captain Morgan believes it. And it's a good thing they actually ran into him. Because Nami is such a good thief, she was able to steal the keys to Captain Morgan's office. So once they do locate his office, they're easily able to get in. And a short time later, they find the safe where the maps are located. But they have to break into the safe. And as they're trying to do so, an alarm goes off. They know the alarm is because of them. Captain Morgan found out about the fact that they were lying. And it's only a matter of time before Captain Morgan breaks into his office and catches them. So they know they need to get out of there quickly, but they can't do so without the map. That's when Luffy shows his skills by grabbing the safe and using all that stretching ability to pull it out. So much force was used that once it does come out, though, he, along with Nami, fall out of the window down to the ground. A few seconds later, a bunch of Marines come to attack them, but they handle them. And while the fight is going on, Roronoa is escaping. Before he could actually do that, he had to go pay a visit to Helmeppo and get his swords back. And at first he's thinking about just leaving, but then he sees what kind of a pickle both Nami and Luffy are in, and he decides to help out. In order to escape this mess, though, they're going to have to get by Captain Morgan, and it's going to take all three of them. But, using teamwork, they're able to do it. They take the save to the boat, which was being prepared by Kobe, and even though Luffy thinks he has the crew he was looking for, they make it clear, yeah, we're not working for you. And Kobe, he isn't even planning on going with them. He tells Luffy, I'm sorry, but I'm staying. I'm doing what I wanted to do. I'm enlisting into the Marines. I fear that the next time we see each other, we're going to be enemies. To which Luffy smiles and says, but now, we're friends. The boat with Roronoa, Luffy, and Nami sail off. But they're doing so with very precious cargo. The map to the Grand Line. And once it's stolen, it gets a lot of attention. Garp, a higher-up with the Marines, who is actually searching for Baroque works, he abandons that to go after the map to the Grand Line. But when word gets out, it also gets the attention of all the other pirates the military base where Kobe has enlisted in the Marines. He's not the only one, though. Helmeppo also has enlisted. You get the idea that Helmeppo didn't really choose to enlist, but he's there anyway. But those two aren't the only new faces to arrive at the base, because Garp has arrived. When Kobe sees him walking around with Captain Morgan, he asks Helmeppo, who is that? And Helmeppo says, don't you know anything? That's Vice Admiral Garp, hero of the Marines, the man that captured Goldie Roger. And Kobe's a little concerned that this guy might find out the truth about what he did. But Garp is more concerned with Captain Morgan. He's more concerned with how Captain Morgan let these people leave with the map. And Captain Morgan tries to cover his ass, but it doesn't really work in the mind of Garp. Morgan and Garp walk around and look at the new cadets, and Kobe especially catches the eye of Garp. So later that day, he brings Kobe in to question him, and a very nervous Kobe enters his office, where you've got Garp and his seemingly second in command, a guy named Bogard. Bogard found out that Kobe and Luffy were seen in a tavern together, so they know that there's some connection between Kobe and the Straw Hat Pirate. So right away, Garp starts questioning him on how long Kobe was working with Luffy to attack the base. Eventually, Kobe comes clean. He tells Garp that he was working for Elvita, he got freed by Luffy, and it forces Garp to ask the question, then why are you cosplaying as a Marine? Which Kobe lets him know he's not cosplaying. Being a Marine is his dream. He didn't tell anybody about his run-in with Luffy because he was worried that they wouldn't let him enlist. Now, normally admitting something like this might get you in big trouble, but Garp actually appreciates the honesty. He says that being honest is a core value of the Marines, so he lets Kobe off. He doesn't, however, let Captain Morgan off. Now, Garp strings him up on the same post that Roronoa was strung up on. He gives a speech to all the Marines about how the leadership at this base has failed them, and how together he will take all these new Marines and they will search out the pirates, especially the ones that broke into the base and stole the map. Now, as for Luffy, he, Nami, Roronoa, they're on the seas, and the good news is Nami was able to break into the safe and get the map. While Luffy talked a big game about wanting to go to the Grand Line, he doesn't really know what it is, so Nami has to break it down for both of the guys. The seas are divided into 4 quadrants: East blue, north blue, west, south. There's a strip that goes right down the middle of the globe. That's called the Red Line. And then there's a strip that goes across the globe. That's called the Grand Line. That's the most dangerous line. As she's discussing this with the guys, they see a bright red flash and they think, oh God, the Marines, they found us. But when they get outside of the boat, it's not the Marines. They don't know who it is, but the smoke, it's definitely not the Marines. It's got this weird smell to it. And then they all drop because whatever that smoke was knocked them out. Next time they wake up, All three of them are stuck in a box. Now, most of them are missing their goods. For Nami and Roronoa, they're missing their weapons. All that Luffy cares about is his straw hat, which is still on his person. And the reason that means so much to him is because it was given to him by Shanks, the pirate whose crew he always wanted to join. Shanks really looked out for Luffy, especially after he ate that devil fruit. With Luffy being so young when he ate that thing, he didn't quite realize the consequence. There's a reason they're called devil fruit. It's because you make a deal with the devil when you eat one. The ocean can turn your back on you. The sea takes away your strength. So when Luffy ate it, Shanks wanted to look out for the kid because he knew that he wanted to be a pirate so badly. He looked out for the kid so much that he saved him from a sea monster at one point, getting his arm ripped off. But he didn't care because he was looking out for his, quote, friend. Before Shanks took off forever, he gave Luffy that straw hat, and Luffy has kept it as a prized possession. So when all three of them wake up in the box, while they just look at a hat, Luffy looks at it as a connection to his mentor. And he's very relieved to still have it. But suddenly the small confines that they're in open up to a circus. And they're really confused. The circus, though, is run by a pirate named Buggy. And he's got a crowd, but it's a crowd of captives. They're forced to clap. They're forced to applause. They're terrified of this guy. Now, all Buggy cares about is getting the map. He was planning on stealing it, and he got real mad when he found out these three beat him to the punch. When they knocked all three of them out, they looked for the map, and they didn't find it. And that's because right before Luffy left the cabin, he swallowed it to keep it safe. Of course, Buggy doesn't know this, so he starts asking all three where the map is, but they don't give up the location. In fact, Roronoa actually tries to arrest them because he still is a pirate hunter, but Roronoa is completely outmanned. And that's something that Nami recognizes very quickly. So in order to distract Buggy, she tells him, I have an idea. What if I were to give you something you can add to this little freak show circus? She then takes Luffy's straw hat and throws it in the air, forcing Luffy to show off his elasticity. And then she takes off running. She thinks this will be a great way to escape, but when she leaves the circus, she sees where they're at. It's a town that was completely destroyed by Buggy, and she is horrified. I mean, she's really shook by this, and she's easily caught and brought back. Buggy did overhear when Luffy said that the map was in a safe place, so once they get Nami back inside the tent, they decide to break them up. They put Nami and Roronoa together, and they keep Luffy separate for questioning. And after the little stunt she did, Roronoa doesn't exactly trust Nami, but he's going to have to because Nami, being a thief, knows how to pick a lock, and she knows how to get out. She starts working on that lock, but it does become an issue when they get an unwanted guest. His name is Kabuji, and the only reason he's there is to get vengeance for his brother, who Roronoa killed, but doesn't remember it because he kills so many pirates. Kabuji doesn't just want to kill Roronoa, he wants to make him pay, so he's going to string this torture out. Roronoa, though, isn't all that concerned. He's not scared of Kabuji, and Kabuji's also so distracted he doesn't even notice that Nami is picking the lock. So while Kabuji is trying this failed attempt to intimidate Roronoa, outside in the tent, they're trying to stretch Luffy and torture him. Problem is, he's so elastic. It's not working. The more he stretches, the more he laughs. It's only when Buggy grabs an innocent bystander and threatens to stretch him that Luffy really jumps into action, breaking free from his chains and wanting to make Buggy pay. And that's when he finds out that Buggy also ate a devil fruit. When Monkey tries that same punch that sent Alvito flying into the ocean, he's surprised at his own power because he knocks Buggy's head off. But that's only because Buggy ate a devil fruit, particularly the Chop Chop fruit. So he's able to chop up his body and bring it back together. And that's going to make this extremely difficult. He shows off those skills when he detaches his own hand, holding one of those smoke bombs that knocked Luffy out before, and squeezing it so it knocks him out again. The next time Luffy wakes up, he's in a water tank and water is quickly filling it up. Luffy, who's trapped, has two options: die or give up the location of the map. But Luffy, who is always a calm customer under pressure, isn't concerned. He just starts holding his breath. And he's rewarded by this because at this point, both Roronoa and Nami have broken out. They took care of Kabaji pretty easily. And they've also taken care of Buggy's entire outfit. His crew ain't showing up to give him backup. When Nami enters the tent and sees that Luffy isn't doing so hot, she busts that tank wide open, and Luffy comes piling out. As soon as he does, he actually ends up puking up the map. And with the map just sitting there, Buggy goes after the map. Luffy had a chance to, but he decided to go after his straw hat. Now he's ready, though, to take Buggy down, and he's going to need the help of his crew. Now, this is difficult. How do you defeat a guy who can literally chop himself up into pieces and put himself back together? Well, you separate those pieces. That's exactly what the group does. They leave Buggy with literally just his hands, his feet, and his head. And then they kick him out. Now that they have the map back, they're ready to get back to the seas. But before they do that, they have to free Buggy's captives. And the captives are pretty surprised because you've got Luffy, who's introducing himself as a pirate. So they're just figuring that they're going to be his captives from now on. But he says, no, I'm not that kind of pirate. I'm a good pirate. And because of that, they have no problem giving him some food before they travel off. Once they hit the seas, Luffy hands over the map to Nami because she's a navigator. But Nami has some ulterior motives. She sneaks off in the cabin, and she uses a shell phone to contact somebody where she says, you can tell them that I have the map. In episode 3, the Marines set sail, and let's just say Helmeppo is having trouble becoming a third-class citizen. He thinks he's better than all the cadets, and he's not. In fact, Kobe kind of shows him up. Not intentionally, but Helmeppo just does a terrible job tying one of the knots. Helmeppo goes to fix it, and it's something that Garp notices. He realizes that Kobe is a little more skilled than most of these cadets, so he decides to bring him into his barracks and kind of take him under his wing. Meanwhile, Monkey D. Luffy and his crew, don't call them that though, they don't like that, they continue to sail off, but there is a slight problem. Their boat is slowly taking on water. Nami knows that they're never going to make it to the Grand Line like this. If they want to make it to the Grand Line, they're going to need a new boat. So they stop by the closest harbor. The closest harbor is a place called Syrup Village. And upon arrival, Roronoa Zoro has big regrets because he sees the wall full of the wanted posters of the pirates, and there's Buggy, who was worth a lot of money. He would have rather just put his head in a duffel bag and collected the bounty. But Luffy has no regrets because as he looks at it, we're on to the Grand Line once we get a boat. Now the good news is Syrup Village is known for their shipbuilding, so it shouldn't be too hard to get a ship. And in theory, it wouldn't be too hard for a pirate. They would just steal one. But when Luffy finds out that that's Nami's plan, he doesn't like it. He puts a stop to it and says, we're not stealing a ship. We're going to get one the right way. And both Nami and Zoro can't figure out what the right way is, how exactly they plan on getting a ship with no money. But Luffy, he's a cockeyed optimist. He decides to just walk around the shipyard, and he finds a beautiful ship. As Luffy's admiring the ship, a guy pops out, and his name is Usopp, and he starts telling Luffy all about the ship. Luffy just assumes that Usopp owns the ship. So once Zoro and Nami show up, he says, great news, guys. This guy will sell us the ship. And that's when Usopp has to explain he doesn't have that power. He's kind of just a grunt worker. But he's best friends with the owner of the ship. In fact, he's best friends with the owner of the entire shipyard. She's really, really rich. And he can take them to her, and maybe she is willing to sell them the ship. Usopp's best friend is a girl who's 18 named Kaya. And she is, in fact, really rich. When Nami sees the house, her eyeballs get huge because the way she looks at it, a big house means a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is easy to steal. As they walk around to the entrance of the building, you find out that Usopp isn't as welcome as he might have portrayed himself to be. Now, he's welcomed by Kaya, but the staff, well, they don't like him. They don't believe that he has an open invitation, even though he does. And one of the workers, named Bucci, tries to kick him out before Kaya even sees him, but she does see him, and she's thrilled to see him. Turns out this day isn't just any day, it's Kaya's birthday, and she's really touched by the fact that Usopp remembered. But while she's really excited to see him, her right-hand man / butler, Klahadore, is in line with the rest of the staff. You can tell that he doesn't like Usopp. But ultimately, Kaya's in charge, and she welcomes both Usopp and his guests right into her house. Klahadore reluctantly agrees to let the friends in, but he does say they're going to need a bath and a different change of clothes if they're going to come to dinner with us. Once inside, Usopp and Kaya giggle about the fact that Klahadore still hasn't figured out Usopp sneaks his way into the house quite often. Usopp then pulls out his birthday present to Kaya, and it's a giant pearl, but it comes along with a ridiculous story that he created. It's one of the reasons why Kaya loves him so much. He always entertains her with stories. He plays it off like these are part of his adventures, but in reality, they're just that. They're just stories. This is a good example of ignorance being bliss. In the middle of the story, though, Kaya starts coughing really badly because Kaya is really sick. Usopp grabs something for her to drink to clear her throat. But behind that smile and that sunny disposition is a very sick girl. As Usopp and Kaya get caught up, Luffy, Nami, Roronoa, they go grab a new change of clothes. Something that Nami's really looking forward to. As they're getting dressed, Roronoa says, "Hey, did the butler look familiar to you guys? There's something about him." And to Nami and Luffy, no, he didn't look familiar. But there's something about the butler that Zoro just can't quite place. The conversation, though, then segues into Kaya. Nami has no sympathy for Kaya whatsoever. She looks at rich people as being very one-dimensional, only caring about themselves. And when Luffy brings up the fact that maybe they can convince Kaya to just give them a ship, she laughs at him, saying, yeah, rich people don't get rich by giving away stuff. So Luffy and Nami decide to make a bet. He bets Nami that he can convince Kaya to give them a ship, and if it doesn't work out, then they're going to go with Nami's plan. They'll steal one. They then continue to get ready for dinner, as does the staff of the house. Now, you might be wondering where are Kaya's parents. They died in a ship accident. 3 years ago, Klahadore took over, and he's been looking after Kaya, and I use the term looking over loosely. He's the reason why she's sick. He's instructed the staff to slowly poison her. And sweet Kaya has no idea about this. She looks at Klahadore as a friend, but he's anything but. And maybe one of the reasons he's so invested in Kaya is because today, her 18th birthday, she officially will own the shipyard. She becomes a millionaire. And if Kaya were to die, Klahadore probably would take over the estate. Of course, this plan is something that only he, Bucci, and one of the waitstaff named Sham know about. Sham, by the way, is a fitting name because that's exactly what they have to put on that night for Kaya's party, a sham. The only new guest at the party is going to be Mary, the family's accountant. He's known Kaya for years, so he wouldn't miss her 18th birthday for the world. As a lot of them, though, mingle throughout cocktail hour, Zoro's suspicions just get the best of him, and finally, he walks over to Klahadore and says, "Have we met before? You look really familiar." But Klahadore says, "No, we haven't met before." He then walks right away from Zoro because he overhears a conversation between Mary and Kaya about what's going to happen to Kaya once she does take ownership of the shipyard. Klahadore completely interrupts it because he doesn't want Mary discussing business during such an occasion. He instructs everybody to move to the dining room so they can continue on with the dinner. And once the dinner does kick off, most of the guests are served fish. When Kaya wants to try the fish, Klahadore says, "I'm sorry, that's not possible." Instead, she gets handed a bowl of blue and white goop. Now, while Nami isn't a fan of Kaya's economical situation, let's say, she does stick up for her and say, "Kaya, it's your birthday. You should be able to eat what you want." Klahadore pipes up and mentions how, because of Kaya's medical condition, he has to watch her dietary needs, to which Nami says, "Does it mean you also have to speak for her as well?" Now, this conversation does get derailed when Luffy mentions how they showed up that day to get a ship from Kaya. And Kaya says, "Yeah, Usopp mentioned how you guys were sailors," but Luffy corrects her and says, "No, we're not sailors, we're pirates." And that takes everybody by surprise. Because being a pirate isn't something you casually throw out there. Pirates are supposed to be mean and violent and dangerous, and Oh, then you got Luffy. He doesn't exactly fit the bill, so a girl like Kaya doesn't really take him that serious when he says it. But Luffy reiterates, no, we're pirates. And he actually stands up and starts to make a toast about how he's always dreamed of being a pirate and he's finally going to make it a reality once she sells them a ship. He starts talking about how he wants to go to the Grand Line, find the One Piece, become king of the pirates. And it's at this point where she goes, wait, you're serious? But as Luffy starts to ask Kaya to give them the ship, Clawdor puts an end to it. He tries to kick everybody out, but Kaya says no, it's late. Let them stay the night. And then he escorts Kaya to her bedroom. This finally gives Nami a chance to do what she's wanted to do this entire time, start ransacking the place. She starts going around collecting valuable goods, and she enters one room, and then she realizes, I shouldn't have entered this room because it's Kaya's bedroom. And Kaya catches her. Kaya knows exactly what she's doing. She knows that that pillowcase is not full of stuffing. It's full of antiques. But she doesn't get mad at all. She actually doesn't like most of the decor. She mentions how, what's the point of having so much if you can't share it with others, like those in need and family and friends? Nami says, so we're friends now? You don't even know me. And Kaya says, well, Usopp does, and that's a start. And the two women sit down, and they start talking. And it turns out that Nami realizes she was wrong this entire time. That Kaya actually isn't this rich, upper crusty, selfish prima donna like she made her out to be. That she is actually different. It's a lot like Luffy with the pirate situation. He's different. So when it comes time for Nami to actually leave Kaya's bedroom, she does so with the antiques that she was stealing, but she actually decides to put them back. As for the boys, and I'm talking about Usopp, Zoro, Luffy, they head to the kitchen just to hang out, grab some food, grab a drink. And Usopp starts quizzing them about their pirate adventures because he's always been obsessed with pirates. He reveals to them at one point that his dad is a pirate. He left, but he's pretty positive he'll be back. And it turns out Luffy knows exactly who his dad is. He's met him. He's hung out with him. And that's because Usopp's dad was a part of Shanks' crew. Luffy spent more time with Usopp's dad than Usopp did. As they're talking about all of this, though, just to kind of kill time, Usopp is using a slingshot to just shoot items into a barrel, and he's really good, and it catches Luffy's eye. He asks him, you should join our crew. But Usopp says, I can't do that. I can't leave Kaya. And that's because even though they're best friends, there might be a little bit of a crush there. Now, while this is going on, Zoro is just looking for a drink, an alcoholic drink. And finally, Usopp says, yeah, there's a wine cellar downstairs. So the two head down to go check out the wine cellar. And when they leave, Luffy decides to get into the soup. I'm talking about that same blue glop that was made to keep Kaya sick. Luffy, not realizing it, decides to dive in. But as he's doing so, Usopp and Zoro head down to the wine cellar, but they discover something horrible. Mary's dead body. Mary was killed by Clawdor. And that's because Clawdor isn't who he says he is. Zoro finally puts the pieces together. Clawdor is actually Kuro, captain of the Black Cat Pirates. He was thought to be killed years ago by Captain Morgan, and Captain Morgan's ego didn't correct anybody on that, but Kuro has been laying low for the last 3 years and infiltrating this family. Now, with Kaya about to turn 18 and get that shipping yard money, he's ready to finally have it pay off. Zoro is standing in his way. Now, Zoro is more than capable of taking out Kuro, but what Zoro wasn't expecting was Kuro's lackeys. With Zoro a little bit distracted because Kuro can move around at a very fast speed. He probably ate a devil fruit. It gives Bucci the opportunity to knock out Zoro. They then just scare off Usopp. When Usopp runs out, Kuro instructs both Sham and Bucci to take both the bodies and dispose of them outside. As for Usopp, he ran into the streets to try to warn people. The problem is he had been doing this for years. He had been screaming about pirates, but eventually when pirates never showed up, people stopped listening to Usopp. A dejected Usopp just sat on the street wondering if anyone was going to listen, and finally someone walks up to him, and he's surprised because it's the Marines. In particular, it's Kobe. Kobe's more than willing to listen to Usopp. And then finally, I want to give an update on Buggy. The good news is he got all of his body parts reattached. The bad news is he got summoned by another pirate, a bigger pirate, a much scarier pirate by the name of Arlong. He doesn't like the way that Buggy's been conducting business, and he wants to remind him of his place on the pecking order. Buggy, thinking quickly, says, no, you know who you should be looking for is that kid in the straw hat, Luffy. He just stole a map to the Grand Line. He's going after the One Piece. Now, maybe if you let me live, I can help you find him. Arlong thinks about it, but he still puts a sack over Buggy's head. In episode 4, Usopp explains to Kobe exactly what's going on, how pirates have infested the town, and how his friend really needs help at the moment. But then you've got Helmeppo, who doesn't believe any of it, especially when he hears the pirate who apparently is alive. He says, no, that's impossible. My father took care of that dude. Helmeppo walks away saying, we're no closer to finding Straw Hat than we were hours ago. And Usopp says, wait, are you talking about Luffy? And Kobe says, wait, you know Luffy? And Usopp explains, yes, I know Luffy. He's in trouble too. He's at the same place. We need to go now. And because Luffy could possibly be there, that gets the attention of the Marines, so they escort Usopp back to Kaya's house to see exactly what's going on. All the while, Helmeppo's being very dismissive of it. He just doesn't believe that Koro is alive. And when they get to the mansion, Koro answers the door, and none of them recognize him as a pirate. That's because he's dressed like a butler. And he handles himself like a butler. Even after Usopp tells everybody he's the guy, he's who I'm talking about, they're still kind of hesitant to believe that this butler would be a pirate. He just currently doesn't fit the description. And on top of it, Koro explains to them both, yeah, look, he's been doing this for years. Poor Usopp runs around saying pirates are in the town, and they're never in the town. He just hasn't been the same since his mother died. Kobe, you can tell, is a little torn. He wants to believe Usopp, but his eyes are telling him another story. He does see if Koro / this butler does have any knives on him, but he doesn't. The fact is, Usopp's story isn't really adding up. Helmeppo ends up interjecting himself into the conversation, saying, we're looking for a fugitive who goes by the name Luffy. And Koro says, oh, yeah, Luffy. Usopp brought him around. I actually have one of the staff members keeping an eye on him now. I'll go get him. Koro goes back in the house and radios Bucci and Shams that they need to bring Luffy to the front door. The Marines are here. As Kobe, the Marines, and Usopp wait for Luffy to show up at the front door, Usopp tries to explain himself one more time to Kobe that what he's saying is true. He's not even so much concerned about Luffy or himself. He's more concerned about Kaya being in the house with this pirate. And Kobe feels for him, but he has to tell him, you have no proof, unfortunately. A few seconds later, Bucci shows up at the front door with Luffy, and it's pretty clear that Luffy is not in a good place. He is completely knocked out, and Kobe is not used to seeing him like that, so he asks Koro, what's wrong with him? Koro blames it on the food and the liquor, when the reality is, Luffy just got into the poisoned food. Once the Marines have Luffy in custody, Koro tries to go back in the house, but Kobe stops him and says, no, I have a few more questions for you. Before he can actually ask any questions, though, they both hear something coming from deep in the house that sounded like a bang. The bang was Nami taking out Shams. Nami was actually the one who found Luffy knocked out. She was really concerned, but when she heard people coming, she had to hide. And she heard the whole bit about how these people are pirates, about how they have been poisoning Kaya. She decided in that moment to kind of bide her time until she could get Shams alone and then take her out. When Kobe, though, asks what that noise is, Koro just says it's an old house. It's creaky. And then he decides to go back inside, shutting the door in Kobe's face. Usopp, who is blown away at this point that no one is listening to him and nobody's going to be helping out Kaya, ends up running away. He knows he needs to sneak into the house before the house gets locked down. If the Marines aren't going to protect Kaya, he's going to have to do it. So he does that. He runs away, he finds a way into the house, and he gets into Kaya's bedroom and wakes her up. And he explains to her that her butler, her entrusted butler, is not who he says he is. He's a pirate. And at first, it is really, really difficult for Kaya to believe that. She's known this guy for 3 years. He's taken care of her. He's looked after her. But Usopp is insistent that she's being played. And it really isn't until Nami comes to the door and explains everything that Kaya finally comes on board with believing that she was being duped. It's still really difficult for Kaya to understand and to accept, but at this point, they're going to be in a fight for their life, so they need to find a way out. And that's going to be really difficult. Because with the Marines sniffing around and Kaya finally 18 and having all that money, Koro is done biding his time. Once he does get in the house, he tells both Shams and Bucci to lock the house down. They're going to kill Koro, finally collect the money, and then get out of town. So as Kaya and Usopp and Nami are trying to get out of the house, they see it gets locked down, and now they know they're being hunted. They could certainly use the assistance of Roronoa Zoro, but he's stuck in a well. That's where Shams and Bucci dropped him. He had a really, really tough time getting out, but he was able to. He used the strength from his past. You find out that the reason why Zoro carries 3 katanas is because one is for his old adversary turned ally. When he was younger and training, there was a girl who was much better than him. And he wanted to beat her so badly, but he never could. They ended up going from enemies to friends and vowing that one of them would be the greatest swordsman ever. Unfortunately, she died thanks to an accident, and he ended up taking her sword as a remembrance, vowing one day to keep that promise. So as he sat in that well, he remembered that promise. It motivated him to get out of the well. But Zoro has no idea what is actually going on. He starts making his way back to the house when he comes upon Helmeppo, who is really eager to just shoot Luffy. Because as they were escorting Luffy back to the boat, Luffy ended up waking up. And he started to explain to Kobe what was going on, how everything Usopp said was right, and how they have to go back to help Kaya. But Helmeppo didn't want to hear it. At that point, he just wanted to kill Luffy and get it over with. And Luffy would have died. Absolutely. He would have gotten shot. But Zoro ended up coming to his aid. He knocked the other Marines out. He finished up with Helmeppo. And he probably would have knocked out Kobe too, but he recognized him. As Zoro and Luffy started to head back to the house to help out Nami, Kaya, Usopp, Kobe yells, "Hold it right there. You guys are under arrest." Luffy stops. He walks back. He looks Kobe in the eye and he says, "I know you've got a job to do, but I'm going to go back and help my friends. So don't try to stop me." And Kobe stands down. Now the good news is the trio of Nami, Kaya, Usopp, they figured out a way to unlock the house. So once Zoro and Luffy do arrive, they're able to get inside. They just have to locate Koro, Bucci, and Shams. While that's going on, you've got Kaya and her group trying to avoid those 3. Way easier said than done, though. Eventually, Koro does end up locating the 3. And he's about to kill Kaya, but he's stopped by Luffy. Luffy and Zoro decide to split up. Luffy was able to locate Koro, while Zoro had his hands full with Bucci and Sham. But the number one goal for Luffy was to keep Kaya, Usopp, and Nami alive. Initially, he thinks it's going to be easy, but when Koro starts shape-shifting around, he realizes it's going to be way more difficult than he thought. Anytime he throws a punch, Koro is easily able to evade it. It seems like Koro is kind of toying with him like a cat with a mouse, but Luffy changes up his strategy. He stops blindly throwing punches at a target, and he decides to use his other senses. He starts listening. Once he starts to focus and hears Koro move his foot, he throws a roundhouse punch that catches Koro completely by surprise. Luffy ends up headbutting Koro right out of the house, knocking him out. Zoro was able to neutralize both Bucci and Sham, but now that those 3 are taken care of, Luffy's crew has the Marines to worry about. They know that the Marines are close, and they know they're going to have to get out of town. They say, "Well, how are we going to do that? We don't have a ship." And Kaya says, "Oh, yes, you do." When she says that, Luffy gives the biggest smile to Nami because it turns out, yeah, he just won the bet. The 5 of them head down to the shipyard, and Kaya is going to give Luffy the boat that he wanted. Luffy names the ship the Going Merry in honor of Kaya's former accountant who died. There is one thing missing, though. He feels like he needs another member of the crew, and he asks Usopp to join. Initially, Usopp says, "I can't. I got to take care of Kaya." But Kaya tells Usopp, it's time for me to take care of myself. Go. Be a pirate, go on the seas, join the crew. So Usopp gives Kaya a big hug, he vows to come back, and now Luffy has one more crew member to the Going Merry. The four of them set sail for the Grand Line. They, though, are not the only ones to hit the seas. Koro also escapes in a lifeboat, but he doesn't have the luxury of kind of kicking back, and that's exactly what Luffy's group does. They're kicking back, they're enjoying life. Usopp's even taking the time to make them a flag. And that's when things get interesting. They start hearing a noise outside, this bombing sound, and when they head up to the deck, they see that the Marines are attacking them. Luffy decides to take a closer look with a spyglass, and when he sees that it's Kobe standing next to Garp, he doesn't say, "Oh, it's Kobe." Instead, he surprises everybody by saying, "Grandpa?" In episode 5, you find out that yes, Luffy and Garp do in fact have a past. When Luffy was a little boy, he used to call Garp Grandpa. But it seems like the relationship deteriorated when Garp found out that Luffy had aspirations of becoming a pirate, and Garp wanted him to become a Marine. And clearly that didn't happen. Even with their history, Garp continues to attack Luffy's ship. But what he didn't bank on was Luffy's elasticity helping him out in this situation. When Garp fires a cannonball at the Going Merry, Luffy uses his stomach and the elasticity to bounce it back, taking out the Marine ship and leaving it unable to do much. It allows Luffy and his crew to easily get away. Luffy's crew sails right into really dense fog that Nami can't navigate through. And it's an issue because they know they need some kind of place to lay low for the time being so the Marines can't get to them. But Luffy doesn't care about navigation. He doesn't even care about the fog because his nose will be the guide. He starts smelling food, so he just directs the ship towards the smell. And what he finds is a restaurant in the middle of the ocean called Barati. Nobody on the ship really wants to stop because they feel like the Marines are only a few clicks away. But it's Luffy's ship, he is the captain, and all he cares about is getting a meal. When they enter Barati, they realize that this is a pretty fancy restaurant, but that concept seems completely lost on Luffy. It takes Nami paying the maitre d' off to even get a table. Their waiter comes up to him, and his name is Sanji, although typically he isn't a waiter. He's one of the sous chefs, and a really, really talented one. He was forced to become a waiter for the day after he defied the head chef's orders and decided to cook stuff off the menu. They got into a bit of a spat, and it resulted in the head chef telling Sanji, "Get out and become a waiter." So when Sanji gets to the table, he's not really in a great mood. He took out some of that frustration on the way to Luffy's table when he saw two pirates about to fight. That's against the rules, so he kicked the crap out of both of them. Sanji's mood, though, does kind of change at Luffy's table once he sees Nami. He starts hitting on her real hard. Doesn't really seem like Nami's all that interested, though. As the group sits down and waits for their food, the Marines haven't forgotten about them. As they repair their ship, they know that they can't just let Luffy and his group continue on and lose sight of them. Kobe tells Garp that they can call an SOS, get some backup. But Garp says, "No, I've got a better idea." And he goes into the captain's quarters. He makes a phone call to a guy named Mihawk. He used to be this massive bounty that was wanted until he started working for the Marines as a sort of bounty hunter. Mihawk is far and away the best swordsman in the world. This guy has a big-ass sword, and he knows how to use it. But unlike most of Mihawk's bounties, Garp tells Mihawk, "Bring this kid in alive." While Garp was making this phone call, Kobe was eavesdropping outside of his quarters. And the name Mihawk doesn't really ring a bell for Kobe, so he asks Helmeppo about him. And Helmeppo fills him in on the fact that Mihawk was one of the 7 warlords of the seas. Those 7 warlords ruled the seas. They terrorized everybody they could. The world government could have went after them, but that would have meant an all-out war. No, instead, they teamed up with them. The warlords would do the Marines' bidding, and in return, the warlords would be able to do whatever they wanted. When Kobe hears this, he is mortified, because it's not what he signed up for. He signed up to take down pirates, not to join an organization that teams up with them. He decides to go confront Garp about it. And Garp admits that, yeah, there are different rules for different pirates. And he feels for Kobe, because he used to be Kobe. When he joined the Marines, just like Kobe, with simple ideals. But as he tells him, I had to adapt because the world isn't a simple place. There are different rules for different people, and it's not fair, but it's the way it is. It seems like by the end of the conversation, Kobe sort of understands the situation that Garp has put himself in. As for Luffy and his group, at this point, they've gotten their food, they've eaten it all. But Nami wants to address the elephant in the room. The fact that Luffy's grandfather is an admiral in the Marines. Luckily for Luffy, he doesn't have to address it because the bill comes. And Luffy just writes an IOU. It gets a chuckle out of Sanji, but it doesn't get a chuckle out of the head chef, who storms out and demands to know who Monkey D. Luffy is. And a smiling monkey throws his hand up and says, I'm over here. The head chef demands to know what the meaning of the IOU is, because in this restaurant, you pay after you eat. And Luffy explains that he's going to be king of the pirates. And once he gets his treasure, he's going to come back and he's going to pay that debt in full. But an IOU isn't good enough for the head chef. He plans to make Luffy pay off his debt right then and there by washing some dishes. Lots of dishes. As Luffy gets ready to clean up these dishes, Sanji storms back into the kitchen and demands that he be put back on the line. He tells the head chef, I'm not a waiter. The two get into a screaming match and nothing gets resolved. But this argument piques Luffy's curiosity, and he sees a plate full of food that wasn't touched. He's able to put two and two together, that this was the meal that Sanji had made and the head chef didn't agree to. So he eats it, and it's incredible. But he just kind of files that back in his head and he starts getting to work. And before you know it, only he and Sanji are there in the restaurant. Luffy compliments Sanji on the meal that he made, and Sanji can't believe that somebody ate it. He's just happy that somebody enjoyed it. Luffy asks him, why is the head chef making you wait tables? And Sanji said, because he's jealous? I should be running this place. And Luffy says, that's your dream then, to be head chef of this place. But Sanji says no. His dream is to find a place that no one knows where it is. It's a place where all four seas meet. They call it the All Blue. Fish that haven't been discovered there, spices that haven't been tasted. One day he vows to find it. Luffy's advice? Follow your dream. Don't let that old man get in the way. Stand up to him. But then their conversation gets interrupted when they start hearing some screaming. And it's a pirate who stumbles in and he's in desperate need of help. And Sanji jumps to it. Even though he's barred from the line, he's going to do it anyway. He's going to cook this guy some food. Help him out. Once the pirate finally gets some food in him, he explains to both Sanji and Luffy that he was drifting in the sea for about a week. And he thanks Sanji for saving his life. And that's when Luffy turns to Sanji and says, you know, you're a good guy and you're not happy here. You should join my crew. I mean, I'm serious. We're going to need a cook if we're going to find the One Piece. But the pirate stops eating right when he hears those words. He tells Luffy that his group was searching for it too. And his group was part of a mighty pirate armada. But ultimately, the Grand Line ruined them. They lost 50 ships, 5,000 men. He's the only one to survive. He warns Luffy, don't go to the Grand Line. Now, while Luffy's stuck inside, his crew is outside. And unlike Luffy, they're enjoying the night. They start drinking heavily, waiting for Luffy to come out so they can get on the seas and leave. But one person who isn't really enjoying her time is Nami. She still can't get over the fact that Luffy never mentioned Garp was his grandfather. For Zoro and Usopp, it doesn't really seem that big of a deal, but for her, it is. And at one point she says, you don't get it. I can't get caught. Not when I'm so close. But she catches herself and doesn't finish that sentence. Instead, she asks the group who wants another drink. She gets up and she heads to the bar. And she does ask the bartender for more drinks, but she also asks the bartender, if I want to secure passage to the Konomi Islands, who would I talk to? And some guy walks up, he offers her a price, and she accepts it. She's planning on leaving at dawn, and she's planning on leaving by herself. When she returns, her and Zoro get into a drinking game where they learn about each other. They both think that they can figure out who the other one is, and what they learn is the only thing they really bond over is the fact that neither of them had many friends. The drinking game gets broken up when Usopp stumbles over with somebody he met at the bar. The guy's looking for Luffy, and right away Zoro recognizes him as Mihawk. He ignores Mihawk's request to meet Luffy, and instead, he challenges him to a duel. It takes both Nami and Usopp completely off guard, And it even takes Mihawk off guard, but Zoro is dead serious. He recognizes the fact that Mihawk is currently the greatest swordsman in the world, and he wants to become that. And in order to do that, he's got to beat him at his own game. Ric Flair style. If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. Mihawk agrees to this duel, and they're going to do it at dawn. For Zoro, now he just has to prepare. He heads into the Go and Marry, but Usopp goes to grab Luffy, because trying to talk Zoro out of this is just not working, and they figure maybe Luffy can help. So Usopp interrupts the conversation between Luffy and the head chef at the restaurant where Luffy was giving it to him about the fact that he really should let Sanji go off and follow his dreams. Usopp ends up grabbing Luffy and saying, "We have bigger issues," and explaining the situation. Nami especially is really, really adamant that he should not go through this duel. But Zoro explains that he made a promise to somebody a long time ago to become the best swordsman in the world. He's not planning on losing. And that's a dream that Luffy actually supports. So the next morning when it does come time for the duel, Luffy and Usopp are right there by his side to support him. Nami, she went to go meet the guy about getting to those islands. Although guilt got the better of her, and she decided to come back and support her friend. And her friend is not doing well. He couldn't even beat Mihawk with Mihawk using a very, very, very small sword. Mihawk did respect his courage, but he also thought he was an idiot. Zoro kept coming and coming, but each time, Mihawk would just kind of throw him to the side, until finally, Mihawk stabbed him. He did respect him enough to let him die a death with his big sword, but when it came time to actually do it, he had a change of heart. He did slash him up, but he did so in a way that he didn't think would kill him. When Zoro hits the ground, Luffy rushes to his side, and Mihawk asks him, "What is your goal, Monkey D. Luffy?" And Luffy looks up and says it's to become king of the pirates. Mihawk lets him know that becoming king of the pirates is a much more treacherous path than even defeating him. But he respects it. He then turns his attention to Zoro and says, "It's too soon for you to die. Grow strong and come find me." And then he leaves. But that wound might have been fatal, because Zoro's bleeding out. Zoro vows to never lose again, and then he passes out. In episode 6, they take Zoro back into the Queen Mary, and both Usopp and Nami start immediately trying to tend to him, while Luffy kind of just freezes. Nami kind of takes control and tells Luffy, "Go back to the Barati and get somebody, get help. Maybe one of the customers is a ship's doctor." Luffy rushes back to the Barati, but they haven't opened yet. And the only people there are Sanji and the head chef, a guy named Zeph. Luffy immediately starts going into explaining why he's there, what he needs. But Zeph says the closest doctor is on the Konomi Islands. That's a 2-day sail from here. And Luffy knows that 2 days is something that Zoro doesn't have. Zeph isn't planning on helping out Zoro, but when Sanji decides to help out, Zeph decides to tag along. While Zeph isn't a doctor, he's a chef, he has seen some stuff, and he has picked up some tricks. And he shows off one of those tricks when he sees Zoro. He stitches him up, but the trick is to put fish skin on the body. Now it's just a matter of playing the waiting game. And Zeph's advice is to talk to Zoro. Try to keep him engaged in this world. While they wait for Zoro to wake up, Sanji decides to cook the group a meal. One person who doesn't really seem interested in the food, though, is Luffy. Normally, Luffy's carefree attitude and high spirits are to be admired, but in this case, it seems like he's kind of just being naive and delusional, and it's something that everyone's picking up on. They don't want to call Luffy out on it, so they just encourage him to eat. The thing that Luffy's more concerned about is what's Zoro going to eat once he wakes up. And he starts going back and forth on what he might need. He can't really make up his mind. And finally, Sanji says, being a captain is the toughest job in the world, because you have to make tough decisions. Zeph once told me that making decisions is what separates a captain from the rest of his crew. And he was one of the best pirate captains to ever sail the seas. And when Luffy hears that Zeph, the guy that's walking around with a peg leg, was a pirate, it blows his mind. Yes, it turns out that Zeph was a pirate. He was the head of the dreaded Cook Pirates. They were pirates who cooked. And that's when Sanji goes into the tale of how he met Zeph. It was 9 years ago, and Sanji was a snot-nosed 11, 12-year-old maybe. and he was working on a passenger ship that got hit by Zeph and his crew. Sanji at the time was an up-and-coming cook, and he tried to fight off Zeph, not from taking anything on the ship, but changing his recipes. Zeph ended up taking a liking to him, all because Sanji mentioned the True Blue. But shortly after mentioning the True Blue, both of their ships got capsized, hit with a giant wave, and the only two survivors were Zeph and Sanji. They were marooned on this giant rock in the middle of the sea. There were 2 bags left, and Zeph told Sanji that both of them were food. And he gave the one to Sanji and said, "Go over there, don't bother me unless you see a ship, and make sure that food lasts." But after about 70 days, they were out of food. They were completely sunburned, and Sanji was pissed off. He went over to Zeph, and he saw that Zeph hadn't eaten any of his food. So he cut open the bag, only to find out that there was no food inside, and that Zeph had instead decided to eat his own leg. It was in that moment that a small, snot-nosed Sanji realized that this stranger had given him all the food, and had sacrificed part of his body to keep him alive. And when he asked Zeph why, Zeph said it's because his days are numbered. But his dream was always to find the True Blue. So he admired a young kid for having the same dream, and he wanted him to carry that dream on. One day, carry out the dream for the both of them. A couple days later, they were rescued, and ever since then, Zeph's been looking after him, even though it's kind of a love-hate relationship. After Sanji tells the story, Luffy decides to go check on Zoro, and Zoro has a story being read to him by Nami. But Nami isn't thrilled to see Luffy. She's pissed. She rips into Luffy for allowing Zoro to fight. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to encourage him. He shouldn't have encouraged him. He should have talked him down. And Luffy understands the situation that Zoro's currently in, but he explains to Nami, "I'm not going to kill someone's dream. I'm going to support it." And that's where the two differ. Because Nami thinks that sometimes people should just put their dreams aside. She gets so annoyed that she has to leave to go and marry, just to get some fresh air. But she hears a commotion coming from Barati, and when she pokes her head in, she sees that there's some interesting people that are causing a ruckus. It's Arlong and 2 of his minions. They've shown up, they've procured a table, and they're refusing to leave until they find Monkey D. Luffy. At this point, brunch has started, so there are a ton of scared patrons in Barati. And Zeph has tried to kick these guys out, but to no luck. Nami rushes back to the Going Merry and lets the group know that they need to head out now. That Arlong is there and he's looking for Luffy. And once he locates him, it's only a matter of time before he tears the place apart looking for the map. Luffy, though, does not follow her direction. Once Sanji starts walking to the door because, as he puts it, if Baratier is in trouble, I have to protect it, Luffy says, "I'm right behind you." Nami tries to remind him that she said they have to get going, not stay. But Luffy says, "No, I'm staying. You guys fed us, so I'm going to protect you." Nami continues to try to talk sense into Luffy, but to no avail. I mean, she brings up the fact that Arlong has the highest bounty in the seas, but it doesn't work. Luffy's just too stubborn and hard-headed. So the two walk back into Barati and find that, yes, Arlong is there. He is terrorizing the patrons. And he thinks that just his lore is going to scare off Luffy into giving him the map, but he finds that Luffy is either insulting him or he's just very, very ignorant to who Arlong is. Luffy asks him, "How did you find me anyway?" And Arlong says, "An old friend helped me track you down." And that's when one of his minions pulls out a bag, and in that bag is Buggy's head. But the only reason Buggy knew where they were was because Buggy had hidden one of his ears inside of Luffy's straw hat. And boy, is Buggy happy to be reunited with that thing. But he heard all their conversations, so he knew where to find Luffy pretty easily. Once he is, though, reconnected with the ear, Arlong's guys put his head back in the bag just to kind of shut him up. Arlong starts demanding from Luffy the map. Luffy refuses to give him the map. And even though fighting is supposed to break out in Barati, it does. Sanji certainly shows his skills, as does Arlong. Arlong takes on Luffy, and he is tuning him up pretty damn good. Arlong would have killed Luffy if it wasn't for Nami, who stops him. Nami shows up, map in hand, and she says, "Arlong, I've got it." A very confused Luffy asks, "Wait, what's going on?" And Arlong, with the biggest grin on his face, says, "Oh, yeah, she's not a part of your crew. She's a part of mine. And sure enough, Nami has a tattoo of Arlong on her arm. A shocked Luffy can't believe he's been betrayed, but Arlong still wants to make him pay. He's about to kill him, and Nami once again steps in and says, "Why would you waste your time on a devil fruit eater? Just let the sea do it." So Arlong does. He throws Luffy into the ocean, and Luffy, because he ate that devil fruit, can't swim, and he starts sinking to the bottom. He's only saved when Sanji dives in and grabs him. When he collects his bearings, he goes back to the Going Merry, and he has a conversation with a still very unconscious Zoro. He fills him in on everything he's missed, and then Zoro comes to. The first thing that Zoro says is he had a strange dream that Nami left, because before Nami did leave, she kind of tipped Zoro off to that. And Luffy has to say, "Oh yeah, no, she did leave." And he takes complete ownership of it, but Zoro says, "You didn't do anything wrong. You acted like a captain. And because of that, I will forever stand by your side as your first mate." So Luffy's crew, or the Straw Hats, as people are referring to them as, get ready to set sail, with one person down. But they quickly fill Nami's shoes when Sanji comes aboard. After having a little bit of a heart-to-heart with Zeph basically told him that if he ever wants to follow his dreams, he needs to leave the restaurant. So that's exactly what Sanji did. He's planning on joining the crew. As they set sail, a very emotional Sanji says goodbye to Zeph and tells him how much he appreciated everything he did for him, and he'll never forget him. Once the crew does hit the open water, they try to formulate a game plan, but Luffy tells them, "We're not going to the Grand Line. We're going to get Nami back. And I know just the person who can help us do that." He then pulls out a bag, and Buggy's head is in it. He swiped it from the restaurant when Arlong's crew just left in a hurry. Now, as for Luffy's grandfather, he's really pissed off, because he gets a visit from Mihawk, who tells him, "Oh, I found your boy, but I didn't bring him in. I didn't feel like it." And when Garp reminds him about the agreement they have regarding the Marines and the 7 pirate lords, he doesn't care. He's more interested to see how this plays out with Luffy, and as he leaves, he tells Garp, "Who knows, maybe your grandson will find the One Piece." And that sets Garp off. He starts destroying his office, and Kobe, who was eavesdropping outside, ends up seeing the destruction. When Garp finally does calm down, Kobe tries to talk some sense into him, because after all, he did spend a lot of time with Luffy. And he tries to tell Garp, yeah, he's a pirate, but he's not a normal pirate. And all Garp hears is pirate, and it reminds him that he failed in trying to make Luffy a Marine. But Kobe says, "Sir, no disrespect, but nothing you could have done would have changed Luffy's mind. He's a free thinker." And it seems like Kobe has gotten through to Garp, who says, "I've been doing things all wrong. Get the crew together. I'm going to address him." But then he surprises Kobe when he does address the crew, and he says that he has been doing things all wrong. He's been taking these Straw Hat Pirates a little too loosely. And now they're out for justice by any means necessary. They're going to find them, and they're going to bring them down. And that is not exactly what Kobe had in mind. In Episode 7, the Marines show up at Baratie looking to find Luffy. But all they find is Zeph. And as soon as they do arrive, Garp recognizes Zeph from their battles together, back when Zeph was, in fact, the leader of the Cook Pirates. But these days, Zeph is just a cook. He's not a pirate anymore. So while he plays dumb about knowing where Luffy is, he does offer Garp a meal. The two sit down and share war stories together. And Zeph kind of does his best to distract Garp from asking any more questions about Luffy. But after a while, Garp does bring up Luffy, and Zeph tells him, "Last thing I want to do is get in the middle of a family dispute." Because I guess Luffy being Garp's grandson is the worst kept secret on the seas. Zeph does tell Garp that Luffy is special, and he reminds him of a certain pirate back in the day that Garp brought to justice, Gold D. Roger. And Garp cuts him off because he doesn't even want to think about that. In the middle of this discussion, they get interrupted by both Kobe and Helmeppo. They had gone off to have a drink. Kobe revealed to Helmeppo that Luffy was indeed Garp's grandson, but then they found out where Luffy was headed via the bartender. So Garp immediately stands up, he says goodbye to Zeph, and they head off to the Konomi Islands. Because that's where Luffy was headed, the Konomi Islands. That's where Buggy was directing them to. And that's where Nami's from. She's from the Konomi Islands, but she's from a village called Cocoa Village. She didn't grow up inside the village. She grew up on the outskirts in a tangerine farm. She grew up with her mother, who's an ex-Marine, and her sister, Najiko, neither of which were biological. When her mom was a Marine, she found both girls in a war zone, and she decided to take them in and keep them. Nami was more of the rebellious type. When they did go into the village one day, she stole a book full of maps, but she was later caught by her mother. Her mother made her take the maps back to the leader of the village, a guy who was kind of the sheriff, mayor of Cocoa Village, a person named Genzo, and give the maps back and apologize. But as she was doing so, the village was attacked by Arlong. He sliced up Genzo, he ransacked all of Cocoa Village, but as he was doing that, Nami and her mother tried to escape back to their hut. When Nami's mother arrived back, she told both girls to get under the floorboards and don't make a sound. And a couple seconds later, Arlong busted the door. He demanded that the villagers pay him a tribute to stay alive. Nami's mother had paid up, but she paid up for one. And as Arlong was leaving, he noticed that the table was set for 3. He forced Nami's mother to admit that it was her and her 2 daughters there. And Arlong was about to kill her, and that's when Nami and Nojiko busted the floorboards and demanded that he stop. But Nami's mother knew that he wasn't going to stop. She asked Arlong if he would accept the money for both girls to stay alive, but that meant that she would die. And he did. So right in front of both girls, Arlong shot their mother in cold blood. You would think that Nami would want to bring Arlong to justice, but instead, she stumbled into Cocoa Village a couple days later and demanded that she join his crew. She's an incredible cartographer. So initially, Arlong didn't want to bring her on because she was human, but when he saw her skills, he decided to. But it was under one condition. Nami wanted to one day buy the freedom of Cocoa Village back. Now, it was going to cost a lifetime worth of money, but he eventually agreed to her demands, and she joined his crew. She never once told Nojiko about this, though. And because of that, Nojiko really harbored a lot of resentment for her sister, joining forces with the guy that killed their mother right in front of them. But Nami finally has enough money to buy the freedom of herself and Cocoa Village back from Arlong. When Arlong's crew arrived back at the Konomi Islands, they set up shop in their normal place. It's an amusement park called Arlong's Park. It's there that Nami meets with Arlong and hands over the map. And Arlong's mission is to have fishmen rule the world. He feels like his kind has been persecuted for far too long, and it's time that humans pay. Now with the map, they know every marine base and pirate stronghold throughout the seas. They also know how to get to the Grand Line. She doesn't get a chance to ask about their agreement because as soon as she hands over the map, he says, I've got another job for you. One of the villages is late with their tribute. It's Cocoa Village. And even though Nami's not really welcome there, Arlong's not giving her a choice. So Nami heads off to Cocoa Village to grab the payment. As soon as she steps foot in Cocoa Village, she's greeted by a lot of shocked villagers who can't believe she's showing her face, and her sister. Nojiko is really the only one that stands up to Nami. She's disgusted by her. She spits on her feet and then she walks off, wanting nothing to do with her. But as Nami is shaking down the villagers, she's unaware that the village has some guests. At this point, Luffy and his crew have arrived, and they're just kind of standing back and watching the interaction between Nami and the villagers, shocked that the person that they thought they knew was currently doing this. Once Nami does get the payment from Cocoa Village, she notices who is watching her, and she storms up to Luffy and says, you got to get out of here now. I want nothing to do with you guys. But Luffy doesn't get the message. He just doesn't believe it. And no matter how much Nami hammers home the fact that she played him, she never was a part of his crew. She doesn't like them. She's not friends with them. She wants nothing to do with them. Luffy just refuses to accept that as reality. Once she storms off, the group is kind of split on what to do. Usopp and Zoro, they think that it's just time to go, except that this is who Nami is. But Luffy and Sanji, they feel like there's something more to this story, and they want to stay. And since it is Luffy's crew, they stay. They decide that they need to get to the bottom of what exactly is going on with the person they thought was their friend. So they track down her sister. Now, at the time, they don't know that Nojiko is her sister, but they quickly find out. And at first, Najiko doesn't want to give any information whatsoever about what happened with Nami. She doesn't even want to talk about Nami. But Sanji steps in and says, well, how about I cook you a meal? I'm going to cook you a meal and you give us some information. It's a win-win for both sides. And for Najiko, who's been basically eating nothing but tangerines her whole life, she quickly accepts that. As Sanji gets ready to cook, Nami has returned back to Arlong Park with the payment. They're hosting a little bit of a party, so she has to wade through all the partygoers to get to Arlong, but she hands it over. Even though it's a party, Nami wants to talk business. She wants to talk about the terms of their agreement. But Arlong tries to brush her aside and says, relax, it's a party. We can talk about this tomorrow. They then get unwanted partygoers in the form of Marines. Now, it's not Garp's crew, it's another Marine group, but these guys are corrupt. They get paid off by Arlong to look the other way, but they have shown up for their payment. And the head of this Marine group, a guy named Captain Nezumi, tells Arlong that this time the fee's going to be double because Arlong's just causing too much of a ruckus. Arlong decides he doesn't want to interrupt the party, so they go and talk about this separately. And he tells Nami she's got to come along. Initially, Arlong pays exactly what the Marines are demanding, but when Captain Nezumi says, you're smarter than people give you credit for, Arlong takes that as an attack. He gets extremely insulted, thinking that it's a knock on his kind, fishmen, and he intimidates Nezumi into giving most of that money back. Once the Marines end up walking out with their tail between their legs, Nami asks Arlong, all right, well, what about our deal? And he's just shocked that she's gotten enough money. But she says, I have the money. And he says, well, I'm a man of my word. Bring the matter to me by sunrise, and I'll consider it closed. But once Nami leaves, Arlong turns to his second in command and says, go get Nezumi back. He tells Nezumi to track down Nami. She's got a ton of money, and to confiscate it. Now, while all this is going on, Sanji had cooked an incredible meal for Nojiko, and she ended up spilling the tea, giving all the information about what happened between her and her sister. And it's a lot for the group to accept. The fact that Nami, the person they thought they knew, partnered up with the person that killed her mother in front of her, just doesn't really fit her description. At least, that's what they thought. Luffy is so surprised by it, he needs to go outside and get some air. He's joined a few minutes later by Zoro, who says, Luffy, she made her choice. She's a part of Arlong's crew. But still, Luffy doesn't accept it. Zoro asks him, how do you know that she's not a part of Arlong's crew? And Luffy says, it's the same way I knew you weren't going to kill me once I got you off that cross. Same way I knew about Usopp. The same way I knew about Sanji. I know Nami's good. And she just needs to know it too. What they don't know is Nami isn't that far away, because she's been hiding all the money she collected in her mother's gravesite. So she had to go there and start digging it up. She gets caught, though, by Najiko, who wants to take her head off. But Nami says, no, Najiko, let me explain. And she tells Najiko everything about trying to buy the freedom of the town. And Najiko can't believe that Nami held this within for so long. She feels really bad about the fact that she despised her sister, not knowing her sister's true intentions. But as they both are talking, that's when Captain Izumi comes up and spoils the party. He takes everything that Nami had, and Nami knows that it was Arlong who sent him. She is distraught. She runs away, she breaks down, she starts crying. She even starts stabbing at her tattoo to get her off of her body, but then she is stopped by Luffy. Seems like Nami goes through the 7 stages of grief right then and there in front of Luffy, but Luffy never quits on her. So when she looks at Luffy crying and says, help me, Luffy says, of course. For the first time, Luffy actually has anger in his eyes as he wants to make Arlong pay. He collects his group together of Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro, and now it's just a matter of bringing Arlong to justice. But that's going to be sooner rather than later, because as they look off in the distance, Cocoa Village is on fire, and that's because Arlong has started the war. And in the season finale, the next day, the group heads into the village to see the destruction, and it is bad. I mean, Arlong really tore this place apart. But the villagers, they're ready to fight. The first thing they do is they apologize to Nami, because Najiko explained everything to all the villagers, and they feel horrible about it. And they want to stick up for themselves. But Nami says, no, you guys can't do that. If you do, it's a death sentence. No, this is my fight. I'll take care of Arlong. And that's when Luffy steps in and says, no. This is our fight. So they do a surprise attack on Arlong's group in Arlong Park. They do catch him off guard, and it allows Sanji, Zoro, and Usopp to fight most of Arlong's men as both Luffy and Nami head inside to grab the map and take care of Arlong. And not shortly after they do grab the map, Arlong shows up, ready to get it back. He's not really worried about Luffy. He already tuned him up before at Barati. But the one thing you can say about Luffy is he's always confident in himself. He tells Nami to get out, he'll take care of Arlong, and the two start swinging haymakers. On the outside, while they're very, very outnumbered, the tandem of Sanji and Zoro are crushing it. They do try to get a little bit of help when Buggy says, I can feel my body. Just let me out of this bag and I can help. And against his better judgment, Zoro does do that, but as soon as Buggy attaches to his body, he just runs away, escapes. Doesn't really matter, though. In the end, Zoro and Sanji took care of everybody. And Usopp, he even got a kill. When the dust settles, they took care of everybody in Arlong's crew. And that's when Nami just happens to run out. She missed it all. As she gives both Zoro and Usopp a big hug, she's thrilled to see that they're okay. They start hearing crumbling from the building where Luffy and Arlong are fighting. And that's because the two have thrown each other into the foundation so much that the building is, in fact, coming down. But they're not leaving. They're continuing to fight. Arlong gets super, super mad as he sees his building start to deteriorate, and he charges at Luffy. But Luffy extends his foot, throws it up, and then brings it down on Arlong like a guillotine, hammering Arlong through the floor. But seconds later, the building comes down. Luffy's crew is just sitting outside of it, stunned, amazed that they just lost their captain, but they didn't. Because Luffy busts through all the rubble. He's fine. And the first thing he says is, Nami, we are your friend. We are your crew. This kicks off a giant party that night in Cocoa Village because they're finally free from Arlong. Sanji whips up some meals. Even Zoro likes them. They kind of have a healthy rivalry, if you will. Usopp tells tales of his battles. But as they're enjoying the night, the Marines show up. And it's not just Garp. It's Garp, his crew, but also Captain Nezumi. Because when Garp showed up, he wanted to talk to the Marine who was kind of in charge of the area, and that is Nezumi. And Garp had heard rumors about pirate activity, but Nezumi brushed all of it aside. He tried to deflect the blame from Arlong and put all the blame on Luffy, which Kobe, who was in the room, stood up for Luffy saying, no, that's impossible. He didn't burn down Cocoa Village. He wouldn't do that. But Nezumi just tried to grandstand, and Garp put an end to the pissing contest altogether. So they show up late at night at Cocoa Village, ready to arrest Luffy and his crew on charges of burning down Cocoa Village and terrorizing the villagers. The same villagers, by the way, that they're currently partying with. Garp instructs Kobe and the rest of the Marines to arrest Luffy and his crew, but Kobe doesn't. And in fact, neither does Helmeppo. They both say, no, we're not doing it because we know that this group didn't do what you're saying they did. And both Helmeppo and Kobe are well aware that they're going to be punished for this. They're defying a direct order, but they don't care. They know that arresting Luffy and his group isn't right, and they're not willing to do that. The rest of the Marines, they have no trouble following orders, but Garp, he leaves Luffy to himself. Garp tells Luffy, I gave you every opportunity to follow my path and become a respected Marine, and instead you chose to become a pirate. But Luffy shakes his head, and he says, no, Grandpa, I've always been a pirate. Garp throws off his cape, and he says, then show me what you got. And Luffy runs at him, ready to punch, but Garp evades it. Turns out Garp is an incredible fighter with unbelievable timing, focus, and strength, and he ragdolls Luffy. Now, just like with Arlong, Luffy keeps coming, but it doesn't really matter. Garp is just way too good for him at the moment. And he tries one last-ditch maneuver. He extends both his arms, and he's going to turn his body into a bullet. But even that doesn't work. Garp just sticks his arm out, and he clotheslines Luffy. Garp starts making his way over to Luffy's body while giving him a speech. He says, you don't know how difficult the world is. The Grand Line isn't some child's game. I told you, you aren't ready. But Luffy says, you can hit me all day long, but I'm never giving up on my dream. I'm going to the Grand Line. and I will find the One Piece. And then I will be king of the pirates. And even though Garp has him dead to rights, Luffy just starts laughing. And it reminds Garp of another pirate, Gold D. Roger, who had the same laugh before he was executed. It actually gets Garp to put Luffy down, and he starts laughing. But then Garp surprises everybody. He goes, all right, have it your way. Lower your weapons. Let them go. Let's go round up the rest of Arlong's pirates and hunt them down and arrest them. The Marines take off, and they leave Garp alone in the village. And Garp tells Luffy, I knew I'd never be able to change your mind. You're stubborn, just like me. But I know who you are, boy. I just needed to make sure that you knew it too. Because everything that Garp did, it was simply a test. And Luffy passed. Garp then says goodbye to Luffy, and he goes off to join the rest of the Marines. The next day is an emotional one for just about everybody. Nami visits her mother's grave. She lets her mother know that she was able to take down Arlong and get the village back for the people. And she's also able to change the tattoo on her arm into something more, well, not Arlong-ish. She spends the last few hours with her sister, bonding, before they have to take off. As for Luffy, he's kind of just chilling before the boat takes off when Kobe walks up. And he's come as a friend, not a Marine. He's brought a gift. It's Luffy's first wanted poster. And it's the biggest bounty in the seas, and Luffy is so excited about it. He says goodbye to Kobe, and when he rejoins his crew on the Going Merry, he excitedly shows them what Kobe brought him. And everybody's excited for Luffy. This legitimizes the fact that Luffy is, in fact, a pirate. But when the initial excitement dies down, Zoro has to let them know that, yeah, while this is cool, this isn't necessarily a good thing. It means everybody's going to be gunning after them. But Luffy doesn't care, because he's headed to the Grand Line. And as Luffy's crew takes off for the Grand Line, his wanted poster goes all over the seas. And everybody who's ever met Luffy gets really, really happy for him. Hell, Zeph even hangs the poster in his kitchen. And even Shanks, yes, Shanks, gets word of the poster when Mihawk hand delivers it to him. One of the reasons why Mihawk had let Luffy go is because he had heard about Luffy from Shanks. So Mihawk walks up to Shanks, who's just with his crew on the beach hungover, and he delivers him the wanted poster, and Shanks is so excited. The rest of his crew, they all surround Shanks with the poster, and they're excited too, because it's like the little boy that was bothering them all those years ago has finally grown up, and he's living his dream, and they celebrate. But then there's the other side. There's the people that want Luffy dead, like Buggy. He's ready to collect that bounty. And Alvida, she's certainly game to help out. As for Luffy and the crew, they've hit the seas. They've even brought a little bit of Cocoa Village back with them. They've got a bunch of tangerine trees on the deck. And then they do a little bit of a ceremony to remind themselves why they're doing this. They get a barrel, they put one foot on it, and they go around in a circle reminding each other what their dreams are. Finding the All Blue, finding the One Piece, becoming the best swordsman, you get the idea. Oh, and finally, as for Kobe and Helmeppo's punishment, they don't get a punishment. They go to Garp wanting to know what it's going to be, but Garp says no. You stuck up for what you believed in, and that's being a Marine. He plans on actually rewarding these two guys by helping train them to be what they want. And for Kobe, that's getting stronger and learning how to fight. For Helmeppo, he wants to learn how to use a sword as good as Zoro. Now it's just a matter of putting in the work. And that is the end of One Piece Season 1. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this video. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this video absolutely sucked. Be nice in the comments section, because nasty comments, they make me feel bad. And do me a favor, go buy some merch or something. You know, just don't drop one piece. Drop like 20 pieces, because I got bills to pay and diapers aren't cheap. Give me your theories about Season 2. And once again, thank you so much for watching.